Hello and welcome to Coffee and Catholics, a Catholic women's talk show podcast. I'm Stacy, one of your hosts, and with me I have...
Hi, I'm Alisha.
I'm Annie.
And I'm Lauren.
Hello and welcome to Coffee and Catholics. Over the next several episodes, we're going to be talking about the virtues. And I know that, or we know that there are lots of sub-virtue, like there's different types of virtues. We can get into all that. We're going to specifically focus on the 7 virtues that counteract or defeat the 7 deadly sins. So those being humility, kindness, temperance, chastity, patience, generosity, and diligence. Humility is going to be woven in throughout because, as we've said several times on other podcasts, humility, pride is kind of the root sin. So humility is what defeats pride. And so we're going to be talking about humility in all the episodes that we talk about virtues. But today, the other 2 virtues that we're going to focus on are patience and kindness.
And I think we said that we wanted to focus on these 2 first because as mothers, kindness and patience are something that are tested
daily,
hourly.
And so it's one that all of us
Half-hourly.
can really we can talk about probably forever.
I've been tested on patience about 5 times in the last 10 minutes.
As we've been interrupted, yes.
Not by these ladies, by my own children. We record at my house.
Yes,
Sorry.
and so, but of course, like kindness and patience are virtues for absolutely everybody, regardless of whether or not you have children, and so
Yes.
or what vocation that you're called to, and so hopefully what we say will help and be applicable to everybody.
Mm-hmm. So patience, it's really funny. I think it's quite ironic or whatever. Maybe I'm using that term wrong, but when I was growing up, I was complimented a lot on my patience. I feel like I don't have any now as an adult with my children. I mean, I know I have some, but I feel like I am constantly yelling at people to do things because I'll ask. I feel like I start out patiently, but then it's not where I end up. I don't stay there. And I think that that's probably my biggest challenge with that particular virtue is keeping myself there. And that non-anxious presence.
Love that phrase.
Yeah,
I do. It's my favorite.
And and that whole in the moment, those intense moments where I have already asked 5 times for something to happen. And I know we've also talked about that at some point. It is our job as a parent to let our children know that's not okay to not listen and things like that. But it's like, where's that fine line? Like when is it where I'm just kicking it up a notch and still guiding, but or is it turned to wrath and I'm just angry at this point because nobody's listening to me? I think I sit on that line a lot.
Yeah, recently I've been praying for patience because I've kind of teetered in and out of. I have a kind of a pendulum in me where there are some couple of days or a week or something where I'm doing pretty good and I'm not really yelling at my kids and I'm breathing through situations that are frustrating and I feel good about this, and then all of a sudden for whatever reason I don't know why I start to collapse and then I'm yelling at everybody and I'm getting frustrated and bad words are popping out of my mouth and my kids are looking at me and I'm like, oh no, and then I have to go confess it and but see, because I think patience and kindness really go hand in hand, because when you lack that patience, when you allow yourself to fall into that wrath, and I think into that envy as well, because I think I can envy what it is that I'm lacking. I'm not getting what I want out of this situation. I'm envying that thing that's out of my reach and I want it and I'm angry about it. That clean house.
Forever be out of your reach until they go to college.
Right.
Yep, right. The clean house, the kids who listen, on the dime, and all
being
of these
on time
things.
places.
Who are these mythical kids who listen?
Like, I mean,
Yeah.
everyone talks about this person's kids listen to them, and I'm like, they don't, just in front of you. Well, I really think that it's all a sham.
Well, and I think that's one thing I've heard about people is that, like, if with your kids, is that, you're doing right if your kids are respectful around other people, and then they come home and they're just terrible.
It's because they're comfortable with you, so they can let down their guard.
There's some truth to that,
and there, because there's been, with a background in teaching, I've always said I have more patience with other people's children, but I have really good classroom management skills with other people's kids, but those kids aren't with me all the time, 24/7. And when you are with your family, that's where you're allowed to break down those walls. Or if you are comfortable with your family, you are. I know that there's some that we still have to keep, feel like they have to keep walls up with their family. But that's why a lot of people say, you're doing something right if you're the one that they're having meltdowns with, because that means that they're comfortable enough to be themselves around you and to let down their guard. And that's the other, the other side of the sword, I guess, because it's like, I feel good about that, but it's also very frustrating.
Yay! This is great.
And there's this tricky age where you have to actually start instructing them on being more virtuous towards you as well. And those tantrums tend to get more and more along the line of disrespect as they get older.
Yep.
And so there's that tricky part of that preteen sort of tween adolescent thing of figuring out, how do I let this be and let these feelings be validated and stay here, and this is, you're allowed to feel what you want to feel, and also to say, hey, you've got to move on and tell yourself the truth, because you're starting to believe lies and you're starting to be disrespectful to mommy. That's a challenging age to be at. We're at that place in our house, and it's a daily. Well, our kids are the same age, so there's that point where we're like, okay, I want to validate what you're saying, and I do, but also you're actually wrong, and you're in a wrong spot, and you're going to get yourself into a bad pattern of thinking if you don't correct the flaws in your thought process.
Yeah. Yes. Well, see, my oldest is 7, and he's doing this, where I'm having a hard time because, like, I want him to be able to express himself and say when he's upset, because I don't think it's fair that I can say how I'm feeling and show that I'm frustrated, but then when he does it, and I've done this in the past, when he does it to me, I shut it down and I say, knock it off.
Right.
He's a human being too, and he has these frustrating feelings, and he doesn't know what to do with them, and all of this. So I've been trying to teach him and teach myself really, like, prudence in terms of, like, when to allow these things to happen and how they should come about. I've told him that, you can be angry and you can tell me that you're angry and you can say it in an angry voice, but there's a point where you cross the line and you become disrespectful. And that seems like it's very situational.
It is.
And so sometimes for me, it's hard to peg sometimes. There are times when my husband comes in and I would have just let it go.
Right.
And he swoops in and says, that was not okay. Sometimes I disagree with him, and then other times I agree with him. So, but you reminded me, Stacy, of so specifically with my children, and I've been learning this patience and this kindness with other people in my lives as well, with my husband, with my side of the family, my mom and dad and my sisters and all of this. But God has really been focusing me in the last few years on my family and really, showing him through me to my family, to my kids and my husband, first and foremost. And I can think of 3 major times, there may have been more, but it's like 3 major themes that he has taught me that have been leading me, I think, in this to be more humble, and think of my family more so that I can be more patient and I can be more kind, because this is really something that I've struggled with. And the first one was that, like, the kids were comfortable for me, or like with me, and so they act out with me. And when I realized that, I was like, oh, okay. And it helped me a little while. And I kept trying to remember that. And I'd fall off the wagon and I'd start yelling and all that stuff. And then I'd remember it and I'd get back on. And I kept doing that. And then, but it just didn't seem like it was, like, really changing me. Like, it wasn't really sticking. And then a while later, it came to mind that, like, it's my job. It's not my job to get what I want throughout the day. It's my job, especially with my children being younger. I have 4, 7, down to almost 2. It's my job to calm the situation, to diffuse the situation, because they have big feelings and they don't know how to handle them, and I need to show them how to handle that. And so I have to be the example for that. And that was kind of a big revelation for me and very profound for me. And so I started instituting that. And I do really well, and then the pendulum would swing, and I'd fall off and go back and forth. And most recently, just a couple of days ago, I had just been yelling at my kids, so incredibly frustrated, because we have free-range chickens. And the kids keep leaving the door to the sunroom open, and the chickens keep getting in, and they're pooping on my plants. And it's driving me nuts. And not to mention, like, my 1-year-old wants to run outside all the time. And then the dog goes out, and the dog tries to eat the chickens. And it's very frustrating. And so I've been telling them repeatedly, you have to close the doors behind you. And they won't. They'll do it for, like, 2 times out of the day, and all the 50 other times that they run in and out of the house, they won't. And so I was just so upset and so angry, because this is the 15th time that day that I had told them, and I was yelling at them, like, oh my gosh, yelling at them. And I stepped away, because within all of this, I've been asking God, please help me to be the mom that you want me to be. Like, help me to be patient, like to be a firm mother that teaches my children right from wrong and teaches them to do the things that they ought to do. But to be patient in that, to be kind in that, to be loving in that, because I fail so often in all of those things. And it just came to mind. So what's more important, getting them to do what it is that you want them to do in this situation, or being a kind, loving mother? And I was like, getting them to do what I want them to do.
Right, exactly. Oh, that's the wrong answer. Wait. Wrong bubble.
Exactly. And then I thought about it, and I was like, hold up. I think God's talking to me here. I need to back up, and I need to let go of that. And then another thought popped into my head, and it was phrased, and it wasn't phrased as a question anymore. It was my relationship with my kids, and therefore how they are going to view God in large part, the church, their faith is more important than insert stressor here.
Yeah, definitely.
And that was huge for me. It was like, wow, like I am looking inward so often. I already knew this. I already knew how prideful I am as a mother. But also how that wrath, I can get so angry with them, and I can envy that which I don't have in terms of all the things the way that I want it to be. And so I knew this, but when it was phrased that way, and how when I am yelling and I'm screaming even with my kids, and I'm having to apologize so often, eventually children, I think, and this is something that's hit me, and it's been daunting and scary, that, kids are very easy to forgive. They're very quick to forgive, but eventually, if you keep saying sorry, but then you just keep on doing the same thing over and over again and nothing changes, they're going to notice, and they're going to get sick and tired of it, and that sorry is not going to mean a thing. And I realized that, and I was like, oh no, that's terrifying. And so, yeah, it's been about 2 days, and so it's only been a short time, but today was so much more peaceful. I was still frustrated, but that thought kept popping in my head every time I started getting really frustrated with them, was my relationship with them and how I represent God in their lives is far more important than getting them to close that door, than even getting them to listen to what it is that I have to say. Because, like, another take you could take from that is like, well, yeah, my relationship is important with them, but I also need to teach them right from wrong and teach them to listen to me. Absolutely. And I don't think that this does is take away from that. I think it more is the method with which you do it, that you implement that in your life and the lives of your children, is that I'm going to do it with that patience and with that kindness and with that humility.
I was thinking about when you were talking about when you keep doing the same thing over and over again, they're going to notice. We all do that because we're all sinners. I mean, how many times have you gone to confession and confessed the same sin over and over and over again? One of the things I tell my kids is I'll apologize for something, and one of my oldest likes to say, "Mom, is okay," because he understands why I acted that way. But I used to tell him, I go, it wasn't okay. I go, I appreciate your forgiveness. I go, that's very important to me. But what happened was not okay. And so I'm going to keep working on myself, and I'm asking you to keep working on yourself so that we work together to avoid, because what we've been talking about through this we journey together towards heaven. And, I'm in control of my choices and my emotions, and sometimes they get away from us. Our kids too. And I think it's important for them to understand that we can make choices with our emotions that are not okay, but we can keep working on them. I tell perfect, and I'm going to try not to do this again, but who knows what the next situation is going to look like. The house being, certain places in the house being dirty really trigger me because we need a clean space to do schoolwork because we homeschool, and it starts to become a fire hazard. You can't walk into your room and stuff like that. And during tornado season, I get kind of worried about, like, how are we going to get you out of your room if your room is too messy? So safety things and things like that. But, I don't have to act that, I don't have to react that way is what I tell them. And I said, so I'll work on my reactions. It would be nice if you could listen to me initially so that I don't feel unheard. And then I don't react in a negative way. I was like, it's not your fault. I said, but we work together to make this work as a team.
Yeah. And
so
my oldest and I were having this conversation just the other day. And after I had kind of this is a really frustrating yelling kind of a day. And I talked to him. He was really upset about it. And I talked to him and I apologized. And I told him I'm trying to do better. And, I'm working at it. Just sometimes it takes a long time for change to happen. But I'm trying. We agreed that we needed to be a team and that we were going to work together to make the days better. And so we decided to come up with a team name, and we're the Butterfists. There's a long story to that. We have a secret handshake that goes along with it.
So cute.
That was a whole lot of fun. Yeah, that was a blast. And so there's been a couple of times when things have gone along, kind of gone wrong or whatever for the day, and we're like Butterfists. Remember that we have to work together. So that's been fun.
And it's not going to be perfect too, and even working together is going to take time. But I think that's part of that humility aspect, that we can't do it on our own. And not only, working together as a team to get there, but also letting God in. Because I think that's part of the thing too, is especially as mom or women, we think that we have to fix everything. And our job to do this, it's our job to do that. But we can't do anything without letting God in. I even get the house clean. So I think when we humble ourselves enough to let God in, that patience is easier to maintain. And in turn, it's easier to be kinder to each other because we're all patient with each other. We know that everybody's trying their hardest, and it's easier to be patient because when we're all at each other's throats, we get tired. And when you're tired this is a phrase with my older two were younger all the time. I know you're tired. You're tired. And it's okay for you to feel the way you feel, but your feelings and your tiredness is not an excuse to be rude to people. And so, and that's us too as adults, because we get tired and we get frustrated, and we've said it 20 times and they're still doing it. Or that one coworker hasn't listened, and, and we get frustrated. But when we take ourselves back and let God in, maybe starting your day with Come Holy Spirit, or even a St. Michael prayer, come, protect me throughout this day, help me do God's will. Or even multiple times throughout the day when you feel yourself dropping back. And we're not going to be perfect, but we keep working. We pick ourselves up and keep going towards the finish line.
I think a lot of it for me is paying attention to those triggers. Because usually, I know for me, there's just a few things. I'm not an impatient person in general, but there are a few things that every single time are going to get under my skin, and I'm going to start to feel that, to start barking at somebody or telling them in that certain tone that's right on the edge of being not so nice that moms use, that we justify because we're trying to get things done. You know which one I'm talking about. But I think you have to know yourself. You know, St. Teresa of Avila says knowing yourself is the beginning of holiness, because I don't know if that's a direct quote. I don't want to say that, but it's beginning to understand this is the nature of where I am, and in my specific soul, where do I need God's specific help? For me, patience has to do with control. When I lose control of a situation that I needed to be in control of, if I'm going to be late, if I think I'm going to be late, if there's even a small chance that I'm going to be late somewhere, mom's going to start losing her, you know what? And but that is my issue. It is really not the end of the world if someone is late somewhere. But my kids have seen me get real torqued if I think they're slowing me down from getting where I need to be. And that's a control issue on my part. And I have to examine that and be like, okay, where are these points in my life that create these regular triggers? Is there something I can do practically to eliminate the encounter with the trigger as much as possible? That alone could save a lot of our issue here, you know?
Well, like I know, because that's a big trigger for me. Like we've even had the conversation. Every time we're running late somewhere, I snap. Like the kids and I have had this talk. Like I'm like, I asked you.
And they know that about you. And they might know that about me too.
But it stems from there are people waiting for us. And I feel like I'm letting them down. Like, I don't know how many times we've been late for our homeschool adoration. And I'm just like, we have people who are waiting. I'm supposed to be helping with this music. And I'm like, this is not at a time that we are not, like, it's not like an earlier time. It's not like a weird time. Most of our homeschool activities happen at that same time. So it's like, why can't we get there? Like, and so, so it gets really frustrating because I feel like, and that's not the only place. There's other places too where there's people waiting for us, sometimes book club or whatever. And I feel like we're letting somebody else down because we should be there. And I've even tried the whole telling them 30 minutes ahead of time that we have to get ready. It doesn't, like, I've tried all sorts of tricks and it just doesn't, we just are late.
Right.
And I'm like, I haven't figured out how, like, I know that about myself. My kids know that. There's been some days where it's beautiful. Like we have 5 minutes. And everybody goes. And then that's actually the most beautiful time. And so I don't know if I just need to tell them every morning, we have 5 minutes to get out of here. But I think they'll catch on eventually.
Right.
Their mom, why are we here an hour early?
I think it's just part of that constant dying to yourself.
Yeah.
Like, just look. Sometimes you're going to be late. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
A mother with how many children might be late somewhere? What a shockaroo.
Right.
Like, these are stereotypes for a reason. Mm-hmm. This is what it means to live life with other people. And this is what I need to remind myself of. This is not your show. Right. Okay? Right. This is a composite of a bunch of different souls. And you yelling at them and giving them a complex about being late is not going to benefit them spiritually. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just stuff like that. When it comes to patience, I think it really, with moms, we actually really are. If you're walking with, you're an interior person, you're inside of your interior, there is a desire. There is a posture of love and patience toward your children already. When you wake up in the morning, there's no mother in the world that wakes up and is like, I'm just excited to take everything out on my kid. Maybe there is that mom. Not in this crowd, okay? Yeah. All of us desire kindness and patience and sweetness with our children. In fact, we try really, really hard every day, as hard as we can to do that. But these triggers happen, and this stuff happens. And I think at that point, you have to listen to the saints when they say things like, if you have a flaw that God has not removed, and you have asked him to remove that flaw, and yet it remains, it is there for your sanctification.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, and that's what I was thinking too, is that as frustrating as it is, I think back to this lesson that I've learned recently that, my relationship with my kids is more important than A, B, and C. Mm-hmm. Another way that it's been phrased for me is how I want to react in this situation isn't worth that relationship, isn't worth that wounding of my relationship. And so that's a hard one for me, because it's like, I'm the same way when it comes to being late. I get so upset. I get so frustrated. I'm yelling at the kids. I'm pushing them in the car. I can see their anxiety. I can see their sadness in their eyes. That breaks my heart. and I'm still just like, it's still going. And so one thing that I've learned for me, and I don't do it well, I think about this and I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good one to follow, but I don't. But like whenever we've had these types of situations and I've just been like, okay, everybody stop. Like we're running late. We are already late and I want to go right now, but everybody stop. I take that breath, calm myself down so that I'm not reacting to the situation, but I'm responding to it and say, look, these people are waiting for us. We're already late. I'm sorry that I've been yelling. Everybody put your shoes on right now and get out to the van. And then I just sit and I just watch them so that I'm not busy doing something else and distracted while they're not doing what I told them to do. And then I turn around and get angry again. Mm-hmm. I just sit and I say, okay, yep, okay, your shoes are on, go. Your shoes are on, go. And doing that, like slowing it down, as like counterproductive as that sounds. But again, I don't do it very often. And when I do it, it works. Like
no,
it works beautifully.
All the experts say to slow yourself down. That when you're getting in that, the answer is to stop and slow yourself down so that you can get out from that. Think, they talk about in the big life stuff, the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. When you're in that brain where your feelings are in control, you're not thinking. You're not being rational. You're scared.
You're in your fight or flight area.
And it takes that breathing. It takes bringing that oxygen because it actually literally cuts off oxygen from that rational thinking part of your brain.
It really is. I don't look into it.
I know. I don't follow all of it because it exhausts me. But I have taken like certain lessons.
Too much at once. Yeah.
But I've taken certain lessons from it that like when you're in that fight or flight reflex, it literally cuts off oxygen from that rational thinking. Yeah. So you actually have to take those deep breaths and that gets you out of that and that oxygenates that thinking part of your brain so you can think again and it's not so emotional. And that's a hard thing to remember to do. I've learned to do it better. I'm not nearly as good at it as I'd like to be, but as I've imperfectly tried to remember to do it and just remembered after the fact, and it gets a little bit easier every time. But
we used to have
a reaction or relationship. That's the question you ask yourself in that moment. Reaction, or relationship. Which one am I going to choose? Because I can't have both.
Yeah, and sometimes you might be like, I want the reaction because I'm angry.
Oh, you definitely will choose the reaction.
Yeah, but then it's that working towards choosing that relationship. It's very hard.
We used to have a phrase, and maybe I need to go back to it because I actually kind of forgot about it until we just had this conversation. But when we used to go to school instead of homeschooling 5 days a week, when we were running late, we ended up adopting a phrase that was God knows.
Oh,
God knows. That. Because there were several times when we were running late, like there was one day that if we had been on time, there was an accident involving a semi-truck at the end of our street. We would have been right there in the middle of it when it happened. And there were some other things like that. And my oldest and I just started saying, God knows. I'm not really sure where we got. Maybe it was during the pandemic because we weren't going as many places. So we just kind of got out of the practice of saying that. But that's what we would, when I started getting really antsy, we would step back and, God knows we're late for a reason, and we're just gonna get there when we get there, and we'll be the way that we're supposed to get there. So, that's always again, letting God into that moment. Yes, it's very rational for us to always say oh yeah, take the breath and calm yourself down.
But in the moment,
but if you're just you're about to. God knows. God knows. God knows.
You can yell that.
Yell it and let that frustration come out, and then. But those words are going to take you back automatically. Yeah, God knows.
Well, because because even if you're yelling it in frustration, it's taking yourself from looking inward to God. So I think that's actually a beautiful way of doing it.
Or even just, saying something like delays are part of God's plan too.
Yeah.
That he's, at the very least, he's allowing this and he's going to use it for your good. Even if you don't know what that is. And I mean, it could be in the midst of this, this is just the cross that you have to bear.
Yeah.
And that you're constantly late somewhere. And it's okay. How does God want me to change?
Right. How do I respond to that reality?
Yeah. And that's really difficult to look at, I think, because especially when we feel justified.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe we are justified.
Yeah.
We are justified because we've told the kids to do this and
I'm
that,
pretty
and they
sure
haven't
that
done it.
most of it is justified.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's justified, but
Well, and then envy is part of that too, because everybody else gets there on time. Why can't we get
Right.
there on
The
time?
mythical children again.
Yeah.
yeah, that's rooted in pride.
And it's,
And it is rooted in pride.
Yeah.
It's rooted in our own image of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, keeping that intact. I found that there's this person inside of me who performs for that person inside of me. Do you know what I'm talking
Yes.
about?
Yeah.
Yep.
And like, if that, like, this is my self image, and it's not about other people, it's about my self image. And my husband, I try to explain this to him, because when we were first married, he'd be like, why does it matter X, Y, and Z? Because that's who I am. This is who I am. And he'd be like, yeah, but nobody's watching. It doesn't matter. I don't care what other people think. I never have cared what anyone thought. I still don't. But there's this person inside of me that I want to be. And when I fall short of that, I'm offended at myself. It's like there's two people inside of me. I don't have split personalities or anything. I'm just saying, like, but that's pride. Oh my gosh, that's ego. That person's ego. This is who I am. I'm a person who's organized. I get places on time.
I've said those words. I didn't used to be this person.
But I feel like pride is the root of that for me. And I don't know if it's true for you guys. I couldn't say that. But anytime that I'm being impatient with them, it's always because there's this part of me that wants to live up to that standard of what I am, or to my best self, or the excellence. It's very American. And we have, like, you know, we have to sort of unpack some of that as Christians, because we've gotten so wrapped up in this, in our culture too, and the culture's woven itself into our souls. And I think that we really have to spend a lot of time unpacking the cultural things that have just sort of crept into our self-images or our expectations for our families.
You mentioned that, and I was thinking it earlier, but then it didn't fit in, and now you're bringing it back up. But I was thinking about how when I lived in Costa Rica, nobody's ever on time in Costa Rica.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Yeah.
And there's just so, like, people show up when they show up, and everybody is I mean, like, things like for work and school, yeah, okay, but like
everything else
it's like, you know, we'll get there when we get there, and everybody still enjoys themselves. Nobody is upset that somebody is an hour late to a party or whatever. They're there and they're enjoying their time together. And, you know, I think about, like, you know, even at church, the kids are running around the church, and mass is just going, everybody is praying, and mass is going. And not that I'm, you know, necessarily advocating, like, our children all running around.
But it is true that in other rites or in other parts of the world, you see a totally different response and attitude towards noises and children and inconveniences.
Yeah. But just that, and that's an impatience too. Is like, and so I was thinking about this, like, part of its culture, because when I came back, I was so much more relaxed, because my day consists of going to work, riding the bus home, reading in the afternoon, taking a nap, and then going and hanging out with my friends.
Nice.
And it was like the most relaxed. I lost weight. I was the healthiest. I ate more food there than I ever, like, I do not eat that much food here. Like, I was telling them earlier that I've hardly eaten today, But there, like, it took me 2 hours to eat breakfast one morning when my host mother made me. It was just so much food. But I lost weight. I was healthier. I was, you know, happy, you know, that sense of happiness. Sure. But it was because I was more relaxed. And so, I mean, there were still some issues there, too. I mean, you can't again, we all have things that happen. But it's kind of interesting, like, you're talking about culture, and since I've lived in two different, seeing that it's a big thing. And since then, I've reacquired that, you know, on time is 15 minutes early. It's the attitude, because that's what I had. That was the attitude I had. That was my mantra. I was always, you know, early for things because that's on time. And now I'm 15 minutes late everywhere. And so, but like you said, you know, which is the more important thing, and which is going to get me to heaven? Yelling at my kids and reacting to that frustration, or building up that relationship and showing my kids how to be that non-anxious presence that we've mentioned.
Well, I'll say you were saying that you didn't know if like pride was the root for us either, but I think it is because it is that root sin. Because even if it's not, like you being late somewhere isn't saying like, looking at a specific image of yourself. It's still looking inward. Mm-hmm. It's still being like, okay, well, I'm getting really, really frustrated right now. It's affecting me in this way, and this is how I feel, and this is how I want to react.
And I'm on the clock, and I have to do this, and I. There's a lot of ego involved in this.
Yeah, because like for me, like it's not even so much like I would like to be an on-time person, and so that frustrates me. But then I worry about what are these people going to think of me, and everything like that, and so I don't really have like this, like I am a punctual, like
See, that's
like that.
For the
I don't
opposite.
have that.
Like it's all about like ego for me. Like it's all my interior.
It is kind of ego because I want people to think good of me. But there is that wanting to respect other people's time as well. And so I don't know, but
that's not to say that we don't teach our children that being on time is important. Hey, well, it is. They live in the culture they live in. Mm-hmm. You have to be on time to work, or what happens?
Well, and I don't know how many times I say Mass doesn't wait for us. So if we're going to go to Mass, Father's going to start at 8:00, whether we're there or not.
Right.
Yeah, and Father, a couple weeks ago, he had in his homily, he was talking about like encouraging people to be on time. And the very next week, we were like walking in right after them. We're like, oh, like we're those people. He was very respectful about it, but
we have to train our children. I think again, it goes back to how can I train them in a way that builds this relationship instead of a reaction. Mm-hmm. You can train kids with a reaction. What's going to happen is they're going to grow up having the same reactions to stuff that you do, and you're teaching them how to respond to something in a stressful way.
Yeah.
I see that play out in my kids all the time. They get stressed out of the same stuff I get stressed out about. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, Mom did that to you. Yeah, that's a lovely little treat I gave you.
And then the way that they do it, you're like, oh, that's me.
Oh yeah, I can see it. I can see it.
Yeah. I know I've been praying quite a bit recently about like protect them from my sin, protect them from my faults, and just don't let them be so wounded so that they don't have to grow up with the same stuff that I have to deal with and that I'm working through and you're trying to dig out. Like protect them from that. And
I asked Mary to wipe their memories. Like seriously, just wipe their memories of all the wounds and the sin that I inflicted. Just have happy memories. Mama, remember the good times. I know that's unrealistic, but I do ask her to do that. Don't let them be wounded by me. And in reality, they will be wounded by,
But
us.
your prayers could lessen that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and we talk about choose your battles, and we hear that a lot. In some aspects, I've gotten a lot better about that. But what I've noticed in my kids recently, because we've had, some tough things going on, is that in stressful situations, they've started nitpicking each other. Mm-hmm. And that's been bothering me. I haven't really figured out how to address it without, I don't know. Because I know that they've got that from, I know that's, we're just talking about, I know that's from me. Like that when I'm stressed out, it's easier for me to.
Picking around at that.
Yeah. And so I've been trying to talk to them about, like, is that really the most important thing right now? Like, is this real, like, in the grand scheme of things, is that something that has to be argued about? Well, I guess not. So I guess that's the best way I can approach it right now. I just wish it wasn't so much right now, if that makes any sense. But that kindness, because that's what I'm seeing, is that they're not being kind to each other because they're in this, they wish that they weren't in a stressful state and they're going to take out their stress on somebody else. But it's not going to get rid of it. It's just going to cause more.
Mm-hmm. Domino effect. And all that, yeah. Yeah, well, and I think, too, about, in terms of these virtues, like looking at my family, like my side of the family, my mom and dad and my sisters and their families, and how different we are. Like, I'm the only Catholic in my family. I have, like, a fallen away uncle, but I don't really have a relationship with him. But, like, talking about them specifically and how in the past I've been so frustrated with, when I first became Catholic, and I've talked about this in previous episodes, but where I became Catholic and I knew the all these truths and I just wanted them to know, but I came off as so angry. I was so mean to them and I was so prideful. Like, I knew this and you don't, and you're just being this sinful, what's the word I'm looking for? The sinful person. Well, no, just being the sinful person. And yeah. And if I can just like tell you these things, these lists of truths real quick, then you will know. And I just completely forgot about the years that it took for me to get to this point that I'm at right now.
The zeal of a convert.
Oh gosh, it's awful. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's awful. And so
untempered by the Holy Spirit, it is awful.
Oh yes, exactly. And then, as over the course of time, as I've learned that that's not the proper way to go about things, that you do things in love, not out of just, that impatience, but learning that they're on their own faith journey and praying for them. And I used to also, one thing that I did, trying to get them to convert as quick as possible. Every time I got together with them, I'd bring up faith. And then me and my sister's boyfriend would just have arguments all the time. And he wasn't somebody, my husband kept telling me to not engage anymore because he wasn't willing to listen. And I was like, but I could have, an effect here. No. Then I realized, no, like it wasn't a situation where he actually wanted to learn. He just wanted to disprove my faith. And so learned to back off from that. But, that took some humility there, because I was like, it's about what I'm doing here in this situation, and I need to continue talking. But learning to back off from them and show them kindness by not judging them like I had been for years. And living out my faith in front of them rather than just using words, just being kind and loving to them and doing it for the glory of God, praying that God glorifies himself through this and that they would have a conversion, but not even doing it necessarily specifically for that, doing it because I love them, like doing it for their own good, for their own sake. And yes, absolutely every time, because I do want them to have a conversion of heart and to know God and to know him in his church and, to receive salvation at the end of their lives and everything. So of course I want that ultimate good for them. But before I was having these conversations and I was only talking to them when I wanted to tell them about God and about, what they were doing wrong.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head and I think we're going to see this through the other virtues as we talk about them too. But, when you said you do things out of love, and I think that's it, right? All 7 of these virtues have to be rooted in love and God's love shining through us and us doing his will. And so that we can be those lights of love to others, those beacons that bring other people closer to him. And I think we're going to continue to see that love and the other 4 virtues along with the humility as we continue to talk about them. And as always, thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Join us again in 2 weeks.
Until then, may God bless you and may Mary accompany you.
Coffee and Catholics is a proud partner of the Smart Catholics Podcast Network. Find new shows to love, meet like-minded Catholics, and join the community at smartcatholics.com.